وثبت أن ما فيه ديمقراطية هناك، بل هناك دكتاتورية لا تختلف أبدا عن دكتاتورية هتلر أو نابليون أو موسوليني أو جنكيز خان أو اسكندر إلى آخر الطغاة. بأمر رئاسي يقال هكذا في عهد ريغن المجنون، يقال بأمر رئاسي أصدر الرئيس الأمريكي ريغن أمر رئاسي بالحرب عقبة، أمر رئاسي بمحاصرة ليبيا، أمر رئاسي بمقاطعة ليبيا، أمر رئاسي بعمل كذا كذا. هل هذه ليست دكتاتورية؟ هذه ديمقراطية؟ الآن انتخابات أمريكية، طلع مواطن أسود أصله من كينيا، إفريقي ومسلم، وكان يدرس في مدرسة إسلامية في إندونيسيا، اسمه أوباما، والناس كلهم صفقوا لهذه الشخصية في الوطن العربي وفي العالم الإسلامي وفي إفريقيا، واستبشروا بخير وصفقوا له وصلوا من أجله ودعوا له بالنجاح، وربما يكونوا قد دخلوا حتى في حملات التبرع الشرعية لتمكينه من الفوز في رئاسة أمريكا. لكن فوجئنا بأن أخانا وشقيقنا الافريقي الكيني الامريكي الجنسيه يطلع بتصريحات صدمت كل مؤيديه في العالم العربي وفي افريقيا وفي العالم الاسلامي. نحن نتمنى وربما تكون هكذا ان هي مجرد زي ما يقولوا في مصر كوزيون انتخابي، هذه مناسبة انتخابية، ان كذبة انتخابية باش تعرفوا مهزلة الانتخابات، ان الواحد يكذب على الناس لكي يعطوا اصواتها، وبعد ياتي التطبيق وينجح يقولون له انت وعدت بكذا بكذا، يقولون لا هذه دعاية انتخابية. شوفوا مهزلة، هذه الديمقراطية؟ لا، هذه دعاية انتخابية، فاكرينها جد لكنها مضبوط، نضحك عليكم يعني باخذ اصواتكم. إن شاء الله هي تكون هكذا مجرد دعاية انتخابية، لكن كونك هو يقول إن القدس سأعملها عاصمة إلى الأبد للإسرائيليين، هذا يدل على أنه أن أخانا أوباما يجهل السياسة الدولية وما هوش مطلع على ملف الصراع في الشرق الأوسط. كنا نعتقد انه يقول انا قررت اذا نجحت سوف افتش مفاعل ديمونه لاتاكد من القنابل الذريه ومن اسلحه الدمار الشباب الاخرى عند الاسرائيليين، نبغى نتاكد منها ويدير قرار مثل هذا. لكن لابد انه عندما فكر في هذا، لابد انه فكر عندما كان يتكلم عن ايران وبرنامجها النووي، لابد ان تكون امام ديمونه بكل تاكيد. لكن لما تكون قدامه ديمونه لابد ان يكون قدامه مصير سلفه كندي الذي قرر ان يفتش مفاعل ديمونه، واصر على تفتيش ليتاكد من انه يصنع اسلحه ذريه والا لا. ورفض الاسرائيليون، واخيرا اصر هو على التفتيش. كان المخرج من هذه الازمه هو استقاله بن غوريون، استقال حتى لا يوافق على تفتيش مفاعل ديمونه، واعطى الضوء الاخضر بقتل كندي، وهكذا قتل كندي بسبب مفاعل ديمونه واصراره على تفتيشه. بسبب اصراره على تفتيشه قتل كندي. لابد ان اوباما امام هذه الصوره، وبالتالي لابد انه كان يريد ان يتكلم على هذا ولكنه يتراجع. كنا نتوقع منه ان يقول اني ساطبق اذا نجحت فكره الدوله الواحده اسراطيل الموجوده في الكتاب الابيض للقذافي، ان هذه الفكره هي الفكره اللي فيها الحل الجذري والتاريخي والنهائي. وأنه مستحيل إقامة دولتين قزميتين في هذه المنطقة. أي دولة عمق 15 كيلومتر، ما يسمى بإسرائيل الآن عمق 15 كيلومتر، أي دولة هذه؟ أمام 5 ملايين من الفلسطينيين. كنا نتوقع أن يقول ملايين اللاجئين الفلسطينيين قررت أن أرجعهم لأرض فلسطين التي طردوا منها عام 48 وعام 67. هذا هو التغيير الذي تتفق له الشعوب ويده الشعب الأمريكي والشعب الأسود في أمريكا. كنا نعتقد أن يقول أني أعمل من أجل استقلال الأمة الكردية وتوحيدها، ولا بد أن تحتل في الشرق الأدنى مكانة تحت الشمس وفوق الأرض الأمة الكردية الممزقة المعذبة المضطهدة المستعمرة من الكل. كان يجب يقف إلى جانبها، لا يقف مع العملاء ويضحي بمصير الأمة الكردية. هذا التغيير والخوف، كل الخوف هو ان هذا الكلام في وقت اقول ان الاسود يشعر بالنقص، عقدة النقص، هذا شيء خطير. اذا كان اخونا اوباما شعر بانه هو اسود وانه ليس له الحق في ان يحكم امريكا، هذه المصيبة الكبيرة، لان هذا الشعور خطير جدا يجعله يتصرف ابيض اكثر من البيض، ويبالغ في اضطهاد السود واحتقارهم. نحن نقول له يا أخي الأسود والأبيض في أمريكا متساويين، كلهم مهاجرين. أمريكا ليست للبيض ولا للسود، أمريكا للهنود والحمر سكانها الأصليين. جاء الأبيض وجاء الأسود، إذا الأبيض والأسود في أمريكا متساويين، ومن حق أوباما أن يرفع راسه ويقول أنا شريك في أمريكا. أمريكا أرضي مثل ما أرضكم أنتم، إذا كان ما يش أرضكم ما يش أرضي حتى أنتم ليست أرضكم، أرض الهنود والحمر. أنتم مهاجرون نحن مهاجرون. لكن ما زلنا احنا نامل ان الاسود هذا يكون معتز بافريقيته وباسلامه وبعقيدته، وانه صاحب حق في امريكا، وان يغير امريكا من الشر الى الخير، وان تقيم العلاقات اللي تخدم امريكا مع الشعوب الاخرى خاصه مع العرب.
Breaking news. The United Nations Security Council has moments ago voted on a resolution imposing a no-fly zone extending over all of Libya, and that, quote, all necessary means can be used to protect citizens.
Resolution 1973 was adopted by 10 votes to 0, with 5 abstentions. The abstentions included China, Russia, Brazil, Germany, and India. The UN established a no-fly zone, banning all flights except those for humanitarian purposes in Libya airspace in order to help protect civilians. But it also considers other elements.
It imposes a ban on all Libyan flights. It imposes an assets freeze on assets owned by the Libyan authorities, money which should be used to the benefit of the Libyan people.
Western powers have frozen the assets of Muammar Kaddáfí and other senior figures in the Libyan government. They say the aim is to help bring down the government refusing the will of its people. But as RT's Lauren Lister reports, history suggests Libya may never see its money again after the international wealth grab.
As violence continues in Libya, the U.S. sends warships and more troops in that direction, fueling speculation of a military intervention. Meanwhile, Western countries may have already launched a war against Colonel Muammar Kaddáfí's North African regime.
Most countries consider the freezing of their assets as an act of economic warfare.
The weapons here, the foreign assets of either Libya, the country, or Gaddafi and his family, that some estimate to be almost $100 billion. It's believed to be spread across the globe, oil money invested through the country's sovereign wealth fund, and billions of dollars of cash in banks throughout Europe and the U.S. The question now is what happens to all this money, especially the $30 billion the United States has frozen, the most ever in the history of this country in this type of situation. It essentially cuts Libya off from the entire U.S. banking system. To enact these sanctions, the U.S. president declared the situation in Libya, quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to U.S. national security and foreign policy. That's not typical considering there's not a clear aggressive action Libya has taken against the U.S. As for Libya's financial interests, analysts say you could look to the history of countries such as Iran. Their assets were frozen in the wake of the 1979 hostage crisis.
Their money that was seized from Iran back in 1979 has still, not been returned to the Iranians. So it's basically time for a plunder play. If we can take it away from them, we will.
Number one, Gaddafi nationalized Libya's vast oil resources and used his influence within OPEC to negotiate fairer prices for oil-producing countries. Two, Gaddafi used the oil revenue to build schools, hospitals, universities, and infrastructure. Three, he raised the literacy rate from 20% when he became the leader, and now it is 83%. Libya has one of the finest healthcare systems in the third world. All people have access to doctors, hospitals, clinics, and medicines free of charge. If a Libyan needs surgery that is unavailable in Libya, funding is provided for that surgery to be carried out overseas. He raised the life expectancy from 44 years now to 75. Basic food items were subsidized and electricity was made available throughout the country. He spent billions on the man-made river where he brought, his engineers brought water up out of the desert. And now pipelines run from Benghazi and Tobruk almost to the door of Tunisia. This man has set up irrigation projects which were established in order to support a drive toward agricultural development and food self-sufficiency. Any Libyan who wanted to become a farmer was and still is given free use of land, a house, farm equipment, livestock, and seed. Gaddafi vowed that his own parents, who lived in a tent in the desert, would not be housed until every Libyan was housed. He fulfilled that promise. Under Gaddafi, Libya has now attained the highest standard of living in Africa. Listen to this. Money from Libya's oil revenue is deposited into the bank account of every Libyan. Women have full access to education, employment, and he has enabled women to serve in the armed forces. If he has lost the moral right to lead his people, what about you? What about homelessness? The rate in Britain is nearing 8%. In France, they estimate that 200,000 people live on the streets. In America, there are nearly a million living under bridges, homeless. We save America for last because America started all this. You are the one that called for such action, and you maneuvered this resolution 1973 through the Security Council and fought for it and were the proudest when it passed. You are the one that called for Gaddafi to step down and leave his country, and you are the first to say that he has lost the moral right to lead Libya, and you are the first to call for his assassination. Well, America, you are hemorrhaging jobs. Nearly 8 million jobs were lost in this latest recession. America now has 15 million unemployed, and when you add to that the underemployed, it comes to nearly 20 million Americans. 44 million Americans now live below the poverty level, and that is rising. A full 1/3 of American families tasted poverty for at least a couple of months last year. That's 100 million Americans. And the number of households collecting emergency food aid is now nearing 6 million. Approximately 1 in 8 American people are using food stamps. 3 million U.S. properties went into foreclosure in 2010 alone, a record high. And the number of families in homeless shelters or forced to live with extended family or friends is nearing 1 million. 50 million Americans have no health insurance, and that's 17% of the total U.S. population. 68 adults in America die each day in the U.S. due to the lack of health insurance. And what about your veterans, America? Those whom you send to fight your unjust wars. How do they fare when they return home? The Pentagon says that 1 in 5 American soldiers are returning from the war zones with some form of traumatic brain injury. Still others suffer emotional trauma. About 130,000 veterans become homeless each year in the United States, and more than half are black and Hispanic. The Veterans Administration estimates that 107,000 veterans are homeless on any given night. Suicide rates, divorce, and drug dependency are alarmingly high and worsening among America's veterans. Your infrastructure is even worse off than your citizens. A full 1/4 of the nation's bridges are structurally dangerous. 7 billion gallons of clean water leak out of your crumbling pipes every day, while billions of gallons of raw sewage pours into your lakes and rivers. According to your engineers, it will take $2.2 trillion to fix this problem. Your record, America, stinks in the nostrils of God. You who in the name of humanitarian efforts want to save the population of Libya, save them from whom and from what? How many Libyans are living in poverty? What's the crime rate in Libyan society in comparison to you who condemn Muammar Kaddáfí? How many homes has he built for his people? How many of his people are living under bridges? No Libyan lives in poverty, not one. The crime rate in Libyan society is nothing in comparison to those of you who condemn him and his rule of Libya. He has built hundreds of thousands and into the millions of homes for his people. No Libyan is homeless. No Libyan is living under a bridge. Why are you angry with him? What has he done to bring down on him the wrath of the West? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to me, the 3 most hated of men are: 1, a rich man who gives away his wealth to the poor, a wise man who shares his knowledge with the ignorant, and the man to whom the Holy Quran is revealed. Why do you hate Gaddafi? Does he share the wealth of Libya with the poor? Well, if he does, and he does, doesn't that make you, America, look bad? You are the richest nation on the earth, and you've got 44 million people living in poverty, bread lines, food stamps, children suffering in America, but you want to talk to Gaddafi about humanitarian concerns? Gaddafi believes that economic democracy can only be achieved when the GDP of a country benefits all its citizens and when the country's wealth is dispersed to every single citizen. Is this why Muammar Kaddáfí, when he came to the United Nations, called the Security Council the Terror Council? Since this Security Council and this United Nation was established in 1945, you said you wanted to bring peace in the world. But there have been 65 different wars since then, and now many more are arising as we speak. Is this your work? Then why should we have a United Nations when you have failed to bring about what you said you would bring about in your charter? So has the United Nations lost its legitimate right to exist? In the park across the street from the United Nations, there's a wall with the inscription from Isaiah the prophet that reads, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." So your hypocrisy is engraved in granite. So when you look at it and look at the actions of the United Nations, you tell me, is that a worthy institution to continue? The preamble of the Charter of the United States Nations claims that it was being formed to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. But Brother Gaddafi said, quote, "Terrorism is not only the terrorism of Al-Qaeda. The status quo is terrorism. As for now, the Security Council is a feudal security, a feudal policy for permanent members. It protects them and it uses it against us. Hence, it should not be called the Security Council, rather the Terror Council. Since the Security Council was established in 1945 and until now, it has not provided security for us, rather provided punishments and terror." Has the United Nations lost its legitimate right to exist? Shouldn't this institution be done away with or completely reformed? But who's got the courage? Who's got the strength? You are weak and cowardly, and you deserve what you get. America is ruled by special interests, not by the needs, rights, and interests of the American people. And you dare to say that the Arab world that is rising wants your democracy? No. They want liberty, they want justice, they want equity, they want a government that serves the needs, rights, and interests of the people. That's what they want, and this is why Muammar Kaddáfí said, this is not Egypt, this is not Tunisia, this is not Bahrain, this is not that, because he has looked out for the needs, rights, and interests of the Libyan people. That does not mean to say that there's no dissatisfaction in Libya, and whether that dissatisfaction is legitimate or not. But if there is dissatisfaction, then let the Libyan people come together and sort out their problems as intelligent, civilized people should do. But it is your intervention. You gonna hear me today. I was in Iraq 3 days before the bombs fell in '91. There were Muslim Sunni mosques. There were Shia mosques. There were Christian churches and Jewish temples and synagogues. And even under Saddam Hussein, there was peace among them. Isn't that right, Brother Baghdadi? But when America went in, under the guise that he had weapons of mass destruction, did they find any? So what was shock and awe about? You want to bring Gaddafi before the International Criminal Court? What about Bush? What about Rumsfeld? What about a government that lied to the American people and caused the lives of hundreds of thousands to be lost?
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Early on Tuesday, striking around Muammar Kaddáfí's residential.
We joined the United Nations because we wanted the charter to be like that. It says that the armed forces only use it when it is a common interest to all nations. But after that, what happened? 65 wars broke out after the establishment of the United Nations and after the establishment of the Security Councils, and after this establishment, 65, and the victims are millions more than the victims of the Second World War. Are these wars and the aggressions and the force that was used, the power in the 65 was in the interest of the common interest of all of us? No, it was in the interest of one country or 3 countries or 4 countries or 1 country, but it was not in the interest of all the nations.
The coalition said destroying Gaddafi was not their goal. Then why bomb his palaces? Now some officials have claimed that eliminating him was in fact their goal.
Libya. It's a vast country, hot, dusty, and dry, 90% desert. So you may be surprised to know there's a huge river flowing beneath it, a vital source of drinking water for Libya's cities, a man-made river that could one day even turn desert into farmland.
A land thirsting for water and home to one of the most ambitious irrigation schemes in the world. It's called the Great Man-Made River, and it flows beneath these sands. It is colossal in scale. 500,000 concrete pipes have been made and laid down over the past 2.5 decades. 6,000 kilometers of pipeline. Engineers digging deep into the bowels of the earth to tap into ancient aquifers. Libyans call it the eighth wonder of the world.
There is water in the Libyan Sahara deserts since a million years ago, and we have to use it. We have to use this water.
Planners here want to irrigate to reduce the country's heavy dependence on food imports. The parched lands around this huge man-made lake near Benghazi are slowly being turned to agricultural use. In its early days, skeptics called it the Great Madman's River, a reference to the Libyan leader Muammar Kaddáfí and its enormous expense, billions of dollars. And the Great Man-Made River comes with a great unknown. Nobody knows just how long the water will last. But that makes it no less vital than a country battling to keep the desert at bay. And Libyans will make no apologies for drawing what is to them life's blood in a dry, dry land. Margaret Evans, CBC News, in the Libyan desert.
British intelligence has reportedly played a key role in the latest push on Tripoli by rebels. According to a report in the UK daily The Telegraph, MI6 officers advised the rebels on the strategy behind the operation and a plan drawn up weeks ago. For more on that, let's cross to RT's Ivor Bennett, who is in London. So, Ivor, we know the rebels had NATO air support for their push into Tripoli, but now it seems they were being guided on the ground as well, if these reports are true.
Yes, it seems like the British had a bigger hand in all of this than they originally let on. The British press today reporting that a team of intelligence officials have been operating in the country for some months now. People like spies, spooks, ex-SAS officers giving advice to the rebels after it emerged that the rebels were this haphazard bunch, untrained, and that they'd need some help if they were actually going to topple Gaddafi. Now, the mandate that NATO have been operating under in the country did not include ground troops, of course, so this has been quite a clandestine, off-the-grid operation, and William Hague, the UK Foreign Secretary, was keen to stress that the advice and kit that they've been supplying to the rebels has been non-lethal, things like night vision goggles, body armour and telecommunications equipment, but it did emerge last night that they did also have a big hand in coordinating this assault on Tripoli that's been in the pipeline for some months now, apparently, with weapons, fighters and communications equipment being smuggled to secret weapons dumps around Tripoli. Then when the Air Force paved the way over the weekend, bombing strategic communications depots belonging to Gaddafi, that paved the way, the signal was given, and then the assault on Tripoli began to surprise Gaddafi's forces. And whilst the British government knew it was going to happen, they too, it seems, were surprised that all the events happened so quickly.
And Ira, what about elsewhere in the EU? To what extent are other countries involved in what's going on in Libya at the moment?
Well, the reaction across Europe has been the same, and that is that what happens next has to be in the hands of the Libyan people, so they're in charge of their own future under a democratic leadership. That's the main message coming from all the EU states, really. But there is some contradiction to all of that under the question of when does it start, with some reluctance as to from European leaders into bringing out and withdrawing the NATO troops. Yesterday we heard Cameron saying that they'll stay there for as long as it takes. Clearly they think it will take longer than is desired. And also Downing Street last night actually refused to rule out bringing in UK troops as peacekeepers should the transition that they're all talking of descend into anarchy. And they've even got 200 UK troops stationed in Cyprus ready to be deployed to Libya at the drop of a hat should they need it. So clearly, despite all this talk of transition and handing over power, there is some confusion and ambiguity as to when they'll actually start and finish.
You will see that the rebels have new foreign weapons which were not adopted by the Libyan military forces. Foreign instructors, foreign weapons, foreign money, foreign scenario, but native blood. When the flow of pictures from Libya started, the evident staged character of the pictures led one to want to take a deeper look at the situation. Note, all the pictures shown were taken by Western journalists, highlighting the situation from the rebel standpoint only. And from the very first frames of film it hit me, the weapons and equipment of those rebels simply could not have been so massive in number and so brand new. Unless the weapons somehow found their way there on time from the outside.
Superpowers have interests, complicated interests, and they use the interests, they use the Security Council, they use the power of the United Nations to protect their interests. And these terrorize, intimidated the third world. The third world is terrified and being terrorized and living under the fear of terror.
You can see in this ordinary demonstrator's hands the light automatic rifle FN-FAL, absolutely brand new, right out of the box. The rifle was produced by the Belgian armaments manufacturer FN. During the Cold War, it was adopted by many North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries, with the notable exception of the United States, is one of the most widely used rifles in history, having been used by over 90 countries. The light automatic rifle was predominantly chambered for the 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO round, and because of its prevalence and widespread use amongst the armed forces of many NATO countries during the Cold War, it was nicknamed the right hand of the free world. This guy has another brand new FN-FAL. And as does this guy as well. In the next photo you can see a mob scene and a guy wearing a white headscarf. He also has an FN-FAL. This means that the rebels could not get all of those FN-FAL rifles from military storage points. And they certainly couldn't buy them in a store. So the question is, where did they get them from? And even more importantly, how could they get the enormous amounts of ammo needed for the rifles when Gaddafi didn't have them?
Libya's cash-starved rebels got a much-needed boost. Nations here signing off on promises of more than $1 billion of aid. But it's not just money the rebels want from the international community.
We are asking countries to recognize the Transitional National Council as the legitimate and sole representative of the Libyan people.
As you can see, these are US machine guns chambered for NATO rounds. And again, they're absolutely brand new, right out of the box. Gaddafi couldn't have a weapon like this because of 40 years of embargo. And also, he really wouldn't need it because the rounds for it are very expensive and getting them delivered is a big problem. It'd be much cheaper and much easier to buy Chinese machine guns chambered for Soviet rounds. Oh, well, there we go. That's a Chinese heavy machine gun. But this picture is interesting not because of the machine gun itself, but because of the fact that the machine gun is again brand new, right from the plant, as well as the instructors who are teaching the Libyan fodder how to use the weapon. And now can you see what this is hinting at? Normally machine guns don't come with their own instructors to teach you how to use them.
Libya's cash-starved rebels got a much-needed boost. Nations here signing off on promises of more than $1 billion of aid.
But then again, machine guns alone don't win a revolution. You need something with some real firepower. And well, here's something. This is an MP-80S man-portable air defense system. Each one of these costs big money on the black market and requires a qualified professional to maintain them. And so that's why we can see an instructor here. The guy teaching the Libyans to manage this high-tech device sure doesn't look like one of them, does he? And here we can see a Joker running around with a US Army pistol and a NATO Kevlar combat helmet. Now how could he get all this? From Gaddafi's military storage? Come on. Okay, this crate is American and brand new. I think you can realize that by now. For example, if you look at the perfect condition of the crate, straps, come on, you can't tell me that this came from Gaddafi's ancient storages. Let me remind you, Libya had a 40-year embargo, so there's no way that Libya could have bought the weapons or the rounds from the US or the UK. It's purely fiction. And by the way, here you can see the recoilless M40 itself. As you can see here, the rifle and the Toyota mini truck don't really give you the impression of a scrappy rebel force fighting for freedom. Wow, and among the rebels we can surprisingly see some African mercenaries that were allegedly hired by Gaddafi to fire on the people. So finally, what is the general conclusion that you can make from our brief photo investigation? Well, we can see a lot of brand new NATO weapons, foreign instructors, American ammo, new uniforms and equipment, and a suspiciously large amount of non-Libyan mugs. Do you know what this looks like? You're absolutely right. It definitely looks like a well-organized coup from abroad. The foreign managers have brought the people, provided the brand new weapons, instructors, and equipment, all to the young people in Libya. Naive young people who work for free drugs, dope, and just the rush of being a revolutionary. Well, maybe you still don't believe me. You've taken a look at all the photos, and there's still some doubt. Well, let me show you one last photo. This is what a real desert fighter looks like. No clean NATO weapons, no shining brand new American ammo from unopened boxes, and no Kevlar vests from Europe. Just some rags, an old gun, an axe, and the will to fight. That's what you see there, and that's what everyone fighting should look like. So what's your opinion now? Do you really think all those people in the previous photos are real common demonstrators?
Well, more speculation has been raised on the reasons for NATO's intervention in Libya. And as RT's Laura Emmett reports, the organisation may have been trying to prevent Gaddafi from burying the American buck.
According to some, it's about protecting civilians.
We must not tolerate this regime using military force against its own people.
Others say it's about oil.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You'd think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli.
But some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret, because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this, one in '96 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organized by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested, and I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
It's happened before. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraqi oil would be traded in euros, not dollars. Sanctions and an invasion followed. Some say because the Americans were desperate to prevent OPEC from transferring oil trading in all its member countries to the euro.
The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen. Laura Emmett, RT, London.
Well, the fight is not over in Tripoli, but the carve-up of Libya's vast oil riches, the biggest in Africa, is already beginning. The Italian foreign minister fired the starting gun, saying Italy's Eni oil company will play the #1 role in the region. As RT's Laura Emmett reports, the service won't come cheap for the Libyan people.
Delivered as a promise, but seen by many as more of a threat. David Cameron says NATO will stay while Libya makes the transition to democracy. As Allied forces lend air support to the rebels to take Tripoli, the Stop the War coalition warns Libyans not to expect they're getting something for nothing.
The Western powers don't do this without asking for a payback. Why is it that the head of the TNC is running off to Paris to meet with the French president? Well, of course, that is one very, very important issue. It was why the Western powers, Tony Blair and others, struck a deal with Gaddafi in the first place. It will be exactly what they're seeking to continue with the TNC, to further exploit those oil riches.
The British government makes no secret of the fact that its motives in supporting the rebels aren't entirely altruistic. Last year alone, the UK exported around $40 billion of goods and services to North Africa and the Middle East. But it's black gold that's the key. Libya has the largest oil reserves in Africa.
When Western powers look at the region, they talk about humanitarianism or democracy, but they think about oil.
Greg Muttitt says it's impossible not to draw a comparison with Iraq. He's written a book about the aftermath of the Iraq invasion, in which he maintains Western powers imposed a democracy which played on sectarian divisions. That ensured years of tribal struggle, but also meant the Allies retained control of the oil supply. While the UK government insists lessons have been learnt from Iraq, Western oil firms move into Libya.
Even before the fate of Tripoli is sealed, the great oil grab is already beginning. BP has a contentious oil and gas exploration contract in Libya, which the UK government will be anxious for it to resume. Italian oil giant Eni is the first to send staff back to Libya, and its shares rose on the news. French Total and Austria's OMV also did well, as investors hoped they'd soon be able to resume production in Libya. But at what price to the Libyan people?
The great fear is that, just as they did in Iraq, they'll create a democracy which serves British interests, or the West's interests, or oil companies' interests, and does nothing for the people of Libya.
Laura Emmett, RT, London.